I want people to walk away with a sense of the film. I want people to walk away with the sense of what went into this film. I want people to um, somewhat take people back in time for it, in a sense of what it played with, and again, and much like my other two books, I write from a historical perspective. I write about it, not as somebody looking back in 2025, looking back to 1962. I look at it from a perspective in 1962.
Welcome to Ira's Everything Bagel, where I talk with intriguing people about everything, their passions, pursuits, and points of view. Please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I appreciate it. Well, this week on Ira's Everything Bagel, we dive into the monster showdown that changed movie history. Though King Kong and Godzilla were born decades apart from different studios and continents, their clash on screen seemed destined. King Kong versus Godzilla, the most colossal conflict the screen has ever seen, traces how these two cinematic giants were resurrected, brought together, and launched into an epic battle that reshaped monster movies, merchandise, and fan culture for generations. My guest today is Thom Shubilla. He is author of King Kong versus Godzilla, the most colossal conflict the screen has ever known. The book is published by Bear Manor Media. It's available on Amazon, Barnes Noble, bookshop.org, and all the usual places. And you can follow Thom on Facebook. Thom, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very, very much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about the book and subjects that I absolutely love talking about.
Well, I wanted to have you on originally to talk about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but this seemed more important in some way.
Much more important. Uh, and I mean, it's funny, King Kong versus Godzilla, despite uh, the trivial nature of them, you know, sometimes gets us through these things. Sometimes gets us through tragedy.
Yeah.
These movies have come out in pivotal times in history, and sometimes we need that distraction, and King Kong versus Godzilla may be it.
And this could be a metaphor for the real conflict going on in the world.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, there's two world powers going at it, of King Kong and Godzilla. Um, Certainly it. It's oftentimes that's been given that metaphor, of King Kong is the United States, and Godzilla is Japan, things like that. So you could look at this movie a lot of ways. So sure, you could look at it from a modern lens in that way. Yeah.
Have to. How did you get an interest in this subject? Because you have a quirky interest in various subjects. That's why I had you on the last time. But this time it's definitely quirky, or for lack of
Yeah,
a better
sure.
term.
So my first two books, so my first book, Primetime 1966, 67, was about the first year that all television shows were in color, on primetime television. My second book, James Bond and the 60s Spy Craze, was about obviously that, James Bond, and all the 60s spy spoofs and knockoffs. But I've always been a monster movie fan. I love monster movies, a long time, lifelong monster movie fan. And
So
a
you're
lot of
what
times
what
people,
you're telling us is you were a bit of a nerd.
oh, big time.
Yeah. Okay. As a kid, I mean, now you're
Yeah,
a dashing
absolutely.
young
Well,
man,
now
but
too.
at the time. And by
But
the way,
always love.
for that interview about the James Bond book, they can go to Ira's Everything Bagel and search your name and find it there. So just look under
Yes.
THOM in the search bar, you'll find it. Go ahead.
It's a problem. So always loved monster movies, monsters, um, and people would always say to me, "Well, why don't you write a book about monsters?" And at monster movie conventions, I would sell the books and do pretty well. But people would say, "Well, do you have a book about monsters?" And no, I couldn't really think of anything that hadn't been written about before. And so I started writing about what's called a monster rally film. So movies with multiple monsters. So uh, House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, Frankenstein meets the Wolf Man. Um, and I got into writing about King Kong versus Godzilla and all the Godzilla films.
You mean you didn't want to
And
write about Dracula meets Abbott and Costello? You didn't want to do
yeah,
that one?
yeah. So
Okay.
I started writing about that too. And I started becoming really engrossed in this, and then I noticed that a specific book had not been written about King Kong versus Godzilla, and so I changed course a little bit, and I decided that this was going to be my main focus. Um, so and then it kind of just grew from there, and that's where we're at now. So again, it's a movie I've always loved. It's a movie that I could watch, you know, quite a bit. I'm actually kind of sick of it right now, uh, and I know that shortly uh, there's going to be a couple screenings of the film that I'm going to be showing, and I'm thinking, oh man, I don't want to watch it again, but I will.
Okay. How does one research this kind of subject other than clearly watching the movie 822 times, which you've done, and
Yeah.
try to interview if there's anybody around that was involved in the making of the film?
No. So, well, number one, there would be not a lot of people are around, and anybody who is around, there's a bit of a language barrier.
Oh, English, you mean?
So
Yes.
it is a Japanese film.
That was a joke, a
Oh,
bad joke. I said English, so okay.
English, yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. Most of my jokes
Yeah.
fail, so it's okay.
So, um, a lot of newspapers. I had to go through newspapers and articles. I looked quite a bit at the what was called the exploitation department from Universal Studios. Their push, how the movie was presented, how the movie was uh,
Marketed?
marketed. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
So how the movie was marketed, things like that. Dove into that, and a lot of backstory. I'm the kind of person that I can't tell you about a movie just about it. I have to say, well, in the 1800s, there was a man named Thomas Edison that invented, and I have to go through this whole
Yeah,
history.
and
And
the
that's,
monopoly of his inventions and how Hollywood started. Yes, the whole
yes,
thing. Okay,
I
gotcha.
can't not tell you a story that way. So I talk about King Kong, the origins of that monster. I talk about the origins of Godzilla 2 decades later in Japan, and so we go through those histories and how. Long story short, uh, Willis O'Brien, who did the special effects on King Kong, felt that he had some type of ownership of King Kong because he did the special effects. So he went to a guy by the name of Beck, John Beck, and said, let's try to sell this movie. And they actually slated a director, a writer, and all of this. And just from reading between the lines, I think probably they wanted it to be a Columbia film, but nobody ever really bit on it. Um, and Willis O'Brien was doing some other stuff, and he was working on it's a mad, 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 mad world. And in the meantime, Beck went and sold it to Toho, a Japanese studio, and essentially sold it to Japanese studios from under Willis O'Brien, and therefore he got the American rights. Willis O'Brien wanted to sue, but didn't really have any legal standing. So there was some legal ramifications that possibly could have derailed this film. So talk about that and the legal aspect of the film, and then I talk about uh, after the film and a number of uh, lost chances that they could have had to make a sequel where they clashed again. Um, this studio Toho had the rights to King Kong for 5 years, and they only made two King Kong movies, which doesn't make any sense to me. If I was making if I had the rights to King Kong, I'd be making King Kong movies every two 2 months. King Kong goes to space, King Kong underwater, King Kong meets Abbott and Costello. We'd be making them. And
King Kong
uh,
becomes Fay Ray. That would be another one.
we'd be making that movie. So they made a second movie called King Kong Escapes, which was not a sequel. It was a standalone film. But I did have the opportunity to interview a lady by the name of Linda Miller. And Linda Miller was in King Kong Escapes. She was a model in Japan, and she was given the chance to star in that film. Um, and so I do a really great interview with her uh, because it has the same director, same special effects supervisor, um, and same studio. So she could give me some insight into the process of the studio and the process of the director, Ishiro Honda, the process of the special effects director, EJ Tubaraya. So, um, so we talk about that in the book, and also times that those suits were used in previous or in future films, and like I said, missed opportunities. And also its journey to the States, how it showed here. And one of the things that I always love in any of my books, I like to talk about, odd pairings. So time movies that it may have played with at drive-ins or as a part of a double feature throughout the country. So and I even talk into kind of the more modern films and how it really in 2020 was the next time that these two monsters clashed on screen again, despite some opportunity. Um, Maybe in the 70s, there was always rumors of it in the late 80s, early 90s. Um, Around 2001, I believe. Yeah, 2001, there was a film called Godzilla Final Wars, where Godzilla fought all of his old foes. Missing was King Kong, which was
Well,
uh,
the essential question is, I think, what was the beef between King Kong and Godzilla?
uh, they were uh, uh, they were almost drawn to each other. Their presence on Earth was almost drawn to each other. So Godzilla was at the end of his last film, was trapped under ice. So he reemerges after a submarine is lurking around that part of the world, and King Kong is brought from his island to star in a pharmaceutical commercial, and and which is a bit of a take on uh, 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 capitalism, I guess, and consumerism, I should say, not
Well,
necessarily
Tom,
capitalism.
Tom, does the term cheesy apply to any of this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So both of these monsters are out of their element and they are on a collision course to one another. They could kind of sense each other. Um, at one point, they bring King Kong, and it's a very iconic scene of King Kong being carried by red balloons and a helicopter. And they bring him to Godzilla, and they hope that they fight and essentially kill each other. So
Well,
that's
was there ever a script where the two of them combined forces and took on humanity?
no. There was not. There was a script for a sequel where um, King Kong rescues a child from a some type of it was a plane crash in the jungle, and they have to revive uh, Godzilla to fight him again. There was never a script like that, and again, until later, until the modern
Right.
King Kong Godzilla films, where they are uh, saviors of humanity, not necessarily um, fighting
Right.
humanity.
What surprised you most when you were researching the behind the scenes stuff? Did you have access, number one, to studio archives, either in Japan or here in the United States?
No, none of that was really too available.
Hmm.
Um, so in terms of studio things, that was somewhat unavailable. It was mostly through stories and interviews and things like that. I think the most um interesting, again, just based on that interview with Linda Miller, how that studio worked and how they came up with their sets and things like that. Now everything was a practical effect at the time. That was pretty cool. And again, I really enjoyed how the movie was marketed. The movie was uh, um, marketed to audiences, and one of the things was it was marketed as a big fight. They wanted it to feel like a heavyweight boxing match, or a pro wrestling title fight. That's what they wanted, and
The most colossal conflict the screen has ever known, in essence.
so they wanted every theater to market it like that. They wanted it to be like, "Come see the big fight," and yeah, hence the title.
Yeah, King
And
Kong versus Godzilla, the most colossal conflict the screen has ever known. So there you go.
yes,
Well,
so
how did you get access though to you were mentioned earlier about the exploitation of it. Were you able to access marketing materials
yeah,
from
yeah,
both
yeah. A lot of the
companies?
Universal put it out for in the United States. Universal had the distribution.
Distribution, right.
So yeah, so all of that stuff was available. A lot of stuff stateside. That's kind of stuff through archive I was able to find.
Well, do you find it easier to access some of these archives since you have a few books under your belt and your background is such that when you contact various libraries or repositories that they're willing to share that
Yeah,
with
I think
you?
so. And just as I'm in my day job, I'm a professor at a community college. I have a library essentially at my disposal of research librarians. So they've always been really great to help me find archive information and
Sure, especially when
get
you
stuff
tell them
in.
it's needed for your classes. Yeah, I could see them believing you on that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there a cultural difference between not so much the two opponents, but the studios, because one was in Japan and one was in the United States? Was there a cultural component to how they viewed their starring their lead figures here?
So that is an interesting question because the common thought, the common belief is that Japan was rooting for Godzilla, United States was rooting for King Kong, and time and time again, I would see reviews, more contemporary reviews, especially after the film was had been released for a number of years, reviews and recollections on the film. And one thing that was consistent was it kept saying, well, America was King Kong and Japan was Godzilla. That's not the way that it was presented in the film in any way, shape, or form. Even if you're watching the original language film, King Kong is the hero. King Kong is the good guy of the film. Godzilla is the bad guy. Godzilla is the destroyer who's coming to destroy Tokyo, and King Kong has to stop him. Uh, and so it's a common belief that that's not. And actually, and there's this rumor that had been going on since 1963 that the Japanese version was different than the American version in terms of the ending. That Godzilla wins in America, or King Kong wins in America, Godzilla wins in Japan, and that's not true. It's one of those urban legends that stuck around for many, many, many years. And when I tell people I wrote this book, or when I told people I was writing this book, that's the number one question I would get, even from people that were fans of Godzilla or monster movies and things like that. They wanted to discuss the ending, and even if they knew, they wanted to discuss it, get some clarification, see what I talked about with that. So the ending is that's an interesting thing.
Well, what about
Uh,
the filmmaking itself, though? It was the approach by the Japanese studio different from the American studio, just in terms of filmmaking techniques, lighting, action, etc.
well, it wasn't two studios that made it. The Universal just released it. They put it into English, and um, so they had nothing to do with the actual filming itself. I think that an American studio, if I and the original intention of Willis O'Brien was to make it stop motion. So I believe that if it was a American-made film, if Willis O'Brien had his way, 1,000% this would have been a stop motion animation film. So it would have looked more like the original King Kong versus or Mighty Joe Young, which was the um, improved version at that point. So it would have looked more like that than the original Godzilla, which was a man in a suit. So I think that would have been the big approach
Well, I
difference.
think too. Well, the reason I asked the question was, yes, Universal released it, but I assume they're the ones that also converted the dialogue into English.
Yeah,
So, was there a cultural difference between the original Japanese dialogue and the English version?
there wasn't much of a difference. The Americans
Okay.
kind of cut out some things, and the Americans added more of a explainer. So they had some news correspondents that were supposed to be like UN news correspondents to help you explain the action and who the characters were and things like that. So uh, culturally, no. But again, that type of stuff was added to explain the monsters
Right.
uh, and stuff like that.
Well,
So
were the filmmakers and the producers were they surprised at the success of the film?
I think so. I mean, at the Ishiro Honda and EJ Tsuburaya, the director and special effects guys, they had made the previous two Godzilla films. So I think that they knew the importance of it, and they were big King Kong fans. They loved King Kong. They that was especially Tsuburaya. Um, that was his favorite film. So he wanted to make a King Kong film. You know, he was invested in it. So um, the other one of the things that I picked up was they were also company men. If Toho Studio said you're going to go make this film, they're going to make the film. So there was some mixed emotions that I think that they had with it. I think uh, they wanted to make a good film that made a profit, so they could make the next giant monster film. That seems to be the feeling that I get from interviews from them. Um, it's kind of interesting, um, even so, just how Godzilla is viewed now.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was last year when Godzilla minus one uh, was nominated for some Academy Awards. The producers and directors of the film, they brought Godzillas to they brought like toy Godzillas with them. They love Godzilla. So culturally, I think Godzilla is now definitely part of this, and this certainly propelled him. To the mainstream. It made him an icon in Japan. It made this character a mainstay in American films, American television. After this, American. The first films were shown. The first films were out there, but I don't know if he necessarily had uh, a very high Q score. I doubt many people would know who Godzilla was, but now I would say, following the release of this movie, both King Kong and Godzilla became household names. Even if you never saw those films, you know who they are. You could pick them out of a lineup.
And you grew up watching those films on television.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I grew up watching them on television, renting them, things like that. So, yeah, I was always a big fan.
Do you have any props that you were able to obtain, either legally or illegally?
No, unfortunately not. I wish. I really wish. I don't know how much that would go for. The again that universal exploitation thing. It goes for a lot. So
Bet.
posters and things like that are real expensive. So unfortunately, I don't.
Well, and you have a lot of pictures in the book too, which we want to
Mhm.
point out for those who like pictures versus
Yeah.
words or a
Yeah,
combination of
definitely.
the two.
Yeah, and a lot of playbills and advertising from the movie. I certainly include quite a bit of that. Um,
How would you define the two different monsters? We'll call them monsters, but they're cute guys. How would you how would you define if you from your point of view? You wrote the book, so how would you define the appeal of King Kong and the appeal of Godzilla, who is more the bad guy? But
right.
what is the appeal of these two creatures?
I think King Kong is. at its heart, it's a tragic figure. I think we could associate with King Kong. I think we, especially in the original, he doesn't get the girl. They shoot him down before he gets the girl.
Right.
I think as humans, we can certainly relate to that. Um, and on the other end, with uh, Godzilla, um, honestly, I think he's just a cool monster. It's all of a sudden you have this giant monster that breathes fire. He was born of the atomic age, so he's one of the first true atomic age monsters. He was in that initial wave of monsters that were giant atomic born monsters. So I think that's always the appeal of Godzilla is that it's just a interesting monster. It's a cool monster to talk about.
And a lot of
Again,
people don't
growing up watching
realize,
these.
yeah, a lot of people don't realize he actually got Fay Ray in the end. So
He stole the
I'm mixing
girl.
movies here and metaphors. What the hell? Were you were you ever bored when you were researching it because you had such an interest in the subject? Were you ever hitting like a plateau where you said, "I got to stop for a while because this is getting too crazy"?
I think writing about the newer films, uh, I certainly don't have the same level of interest, but I thought it was something that I needed to talk about. I think when I got to that point, uh, there were certain times where I was saying, I can't wait for this to wrap up. Um, but when I would discover something new about the original film, when I'd find a new piece of information, when I'd find a new uh, um, uh, uh, ad that I could use, that just jumped me right back into it.
Yeah.
And even things like there's a drive-in. I live in northeastern Pennsylvania. There's a drive-in, the Mahoning Drive-in. They only show retro films on 35 millimeter, and the guys that own it now are they're also historians of that drive-in, and they were able to dig up for me the first time King Kong versus Godzilla played at that drive-in. But uh, last summer, I was able to go see King Kong versus Godzilla at that drive-in too. So it was really cool.
Yeah,
So
closing the
um,
circle.
yeah,
Well, we have about
um,
a minute left. What do you want people to take away from reading the book? Again, it's called King Kong versus Godzilla, the most colossal conflict the screen has ever known. What do you want people to take away from it?
I want people to walk away with a sense of the film. I want people to walk away with the sense of what went into this film. I want people to um, somewhat take people back in time for it, in a sense of what it played with, and uh, again, and much like my other two books, I write from a historical perspective. I write about it, not as somebody looking back in 2025, looking back to 1962. I look at it from a perspective in 1962. So I want people to do that. I want people to and really enjoy it. I really want people to. It's not really it's not solving the world's problems. We're not solving uh, Russia and Ukraine here. But hopefully, again, it can maybe distract at some point in time.
Well, that's a great way to leave it. My guest has been Thom Shubilla. He's author of King Kong versus Godzilla, the most colossal conflict the screen has ever known. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, bookshop.org, and all the usual places. It's published by Bear Manor Media, and you can follow Thom on Facebook. Thom, thanks for being on the show again.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate this.
Thank you. And don't forget, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I appreciate it. And join us every Thursday for a new schmear on Ira's Everything Bagel.